Labels are a funny thing, aren't they? And I should know because I get labelled all the time, right? America's finest British import, YouTube sensation, the world's most modest man. But there's one label that gets thrown my way that's taken a bit of getting used to. And that label, ladies and gentlemen, is comedian. While researching the accuracy of that claim, my producers found that 73% of all my humour happens by accident, something they were adamant I should not be telling my audience. Alright, shut up now, I'm going to talk to YouTube. If there is any truth to this label, if people really do respond to my work by doing this, laugh, then maybe I should produce another video on the subject.
For the first 26 years of my existence, I lived exclusively on an island to the north of France. That island is called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, or just Airstrip 1 for short.
I was completely and utterly a little bit happy with my life there. Then, quite unexpectedly, came Act 2, my move to the United States. For 8 years, I lived in Indiana, followed by 6 years in the great state of Chicago, just north of Illinois. And so the Midwest has been my home for the better part of 14 years, and hopefully many more to come. When you take into account everything I've said in the first 60 seconds of this elaborate motion picture, you might arrive at the same conclusion as me, that it's time to hear the truth about British versus American humour from someone who's lived it, Bob Hope. Sadly, after blowing our travel budget shooting that 2-second soundbite in Bob's home state of Ohio, my researchers suddenly remembered that the English-born comedian was no longer alive, so the task ultimately fell to me. To help recover those costs, we're asking for your help by supporting Lost in the Pond on Patreon at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Anyway, without further ado, here at last is the truth about British versus American humour, or humour as it's spelled in America. One of the chief accusations that you'll hear from the British is that Americans don't understand sarcasm, that to them the concept of irony is reserved for the nation's industrial workers. That was a joke about iron. But this has never been my experience. Long before I moved to the United States, I recognized these very traits in The Onion, both the satirical rag and the vegetable, whose comedy doesn't get enough credit for how multi-layered it is. I found instead that British sarcasm and its US counterpart are two highly abundant species with completely different features. British humour is more subtle, often delivered without a nod and a wink to clue in the recipient. No, it's not at all unsettling to receive emails from strangers on the internet inviting me to stay at their house just outside of Sheboygan. This partially describes my own brand of humour and explains why I definitely don't have American friends. On the other hand, American sarcasm is more playful, but no less biting. It's often executed with a knowingly exaggerated smile. Wow, an invite to stay at your secluded house in the woods, 2 hours away from civilization. Where do I sign up? Sorry about that, that was the best I could do. In the past, I've often accused America from shying away from innuendo. But this is unfair. After all, just this week I encountered a new store in Indiana named Uranus Fudge Factory, which bears the tagline, "The best fudge comes from Uranus." On top of that, the country is home to many rude place names, including PP Township, Butts County, Georgia, and Big Bone, Kentucky. But in my experience, Americans are just a little bit less receptive to so-called toilet humour than the British. And there's no shame in that. After all, innuendo is the bedrock of British society. A language so palpable, it penetrates us everywhere we go. That was not an example. From the euphemistic wordplay of William Shakespeare to the bawdy Cockney songs of Elsa Lanchester, Britain has a storied history of improbably veiling a sex joke underneath words like gazebo. And whenever I resort to such highbrow comedy, Americans, particularly here in the Midwest, will respond in one of three ways. By emitting nervous laughter, by saying the letters TMI, or by escorting me out of the Allen County Public Library. In 2022, one area I'd have to give Americans the edge is slapstick, a form of comedy defined by pratfalls, painful mishaps, and exaggerated delivery. And I know what you're thinking, whoa, Lawrence, don't go changing your catchphrases again. But you're also thinking that the average American isn't routinely brought down by a carefully placed banana skin, while trying to outwit a dastardly and maniacal fiend by the name of Chuckles. That stuff is just on TV. And this is true. Many of the comedic differences that separate our two countries play out in accordance with a script. And Slapstick is no different. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that Britain doesn't have its own bumbling, buffoonish characters that orchestrate one outrageous catastrophe after another. I mean, I think we've all seen the news this week. And of course, my homeland has given us the likes of Charlie Chaplin, Benny Hill, and Mr. Bean. Moreover, early slapstick can be traced back to Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors or the English Punch and Judy shows. Not to mention the still popular Christmas pantomimes featuring celebrities that were once famous in the 90s, and Ben from X Factor. But American film and television takes it to a different level. Back before humans came up with colours, American motion pictures were churning out slapstick legend after slapstick legend, including Buster Keaton, Oliver Hardy, Roscoe Arbuckle, Mabel Normand, The Three Stooges, The Marx Brothers, Abbott and Costello, and Goofy, who admittedly doesn't count. More recently, two of the greatest comedies ever made, Airplane and Naked Gun, made considerable use of slapstick. And today the art form finds itself not just within the realm of comedy, but in Marvel films, pro wrestling, and the US Senate. Surreal humour, comedy that employs absurdist themes in order to subvert the norms of reasoning, is something that's long been associated with Britain. And onions. One of the most famous examples of this is Monty Python, which brought us the Dead Parrot sketch, the Lumberjack song, and the Ministry of Silly Walks. I've heard it said that Monty Python is too sophisticated for Americans, that the funniest joke in the world would yield little more than a chuckle. But this seems at odds with the rate at which Americans tell me that no other comedy comes close. Don't believe me? John Cleese himself said as much 3 years ago. Monty Python, or Monty Python as Americans would say, was a British cultural phenomenon whose impact on America was bettered perhaps only by the Beatles and Lost in the Pond. And while Britain has gifted us other absurdist heavyweights like the Young Ones, the Mighty Boosh, and the Day to Day, it would be absurd in itself to ignore America's own contributions, which include not just the Naked Gun and Airplane, but Adult Swim, Portlandia, and Dream Home Makeover. Every now and then, amid the general sense of laughter, comedy can take you to places you didn't expect, like Ohio. Are you really sure you can't tell that this is Illinois? But it can also take you to an emotional place. A place you might not ordinarily associate with a comedy club or a sitcom. It's a character suddenly lifting the veil on his or her sadness, loneliness, or fears. It's David Brent begging for his job back. It's Edmund Blackadder going over the top. Nan's last scene in The Royal Family. The final shot of Fresh Prince. The Golden Girls saying goodbye, and That Funny Feeling by Bo Burnham. It's when the laughter dies down and you're standing there wondering if you really are a comedian, or if you're forever doomed to play out that fantasy in your bedroom, like you did when you were 12, before you knew the meaning of the words self-employed and tax return. Before putting this video together, I briefly determined that British comedy, with its penchant for the understated, probably had a finer grasp of comedic pathos than its American counterpart. But in listing off those examples just now, I'm not sure that's true. At the heart of all good comedy, irrespective of its country of origin, is a depiction of the human condition. And for once, I'm not talking about bowel movements. What I'm saying is, British and American comedy have an equal ability to punch you in the gut. I might be talking about bowel movements. And on that note, thank you for watching this video on British versus American comedy. As it happens, I test out most of my jokes on Twitter, where you can follow me at Lost in the Pond US, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that I don't have to. Until the next video, goodbye.